Coming up in our newscast tonight, the commander of the U.S. forces Korea provides reassurance that Seoul and Washington's military alliance and defensive readiness are unaffected by recent changes. This comes as his response to concerns over scaled-down joint military drills. Following accidents involving Boeing 737 MAX planes, the U.S. is grounding the models and other jets associated with that line. Two South Korean airline companies also announced they will not operate any of the infamous Boeing model until they are confirmed safe to fly. Two K-pop singers are grilled by police in a sex scandal that has shaken the industry to its core. In the latest of a series of shocking revelations is a text message exchange from 2016 in which they assure the police commissioner general had their backs. News Center begins now. It's 8 p.m. here in Korea, live from our studio in Seoul. This is Arirang News Center. Welcome to our program. I'm Daniel Cha. Seoul and Washington have been scaling down their joint military drills to make room for diplomacy, a move that caused concern in some quarters. The commander of U.S. forces Korea, General Robert Abrams, dismissed those worries, emphasizing the alliance is more than ironclad and the current defense posture is strong. Kan Young-woo starts us off.
There have been voices of concern about Seoul and Washington scaling down or ending certain joint military drills. It's fear that could weaken the allies' defense readiness against North Korean threats when Pyongyang has yet to take any big steps toward complete denuclearization. But U.S. Forces Korea Commander General Robert Abrams has dismissed those worries. In an exclusive interview with Yonhap News Agency on Wednesday, Abrams said the ROK-U.S. military alliance is absolutely committed to ensuring that it's ready to deal with any crisis or potential hostilities. He stressed that the combined forces are doing everything necessary to assure their readiness as a force. Citing his 37 years of experience in the military, Abrams reassured the public that his troops train at every level to be prepared for any situation. In regards to the diplomatic situation with North Korea having changed dramatically in the last year, General Abrams said the ROK-U.S. military alliance has to adjust how it meets its responsibilities to maintain a trained and ready force while creating space for diplomacy to work. So to support the ongoing peace efforts with Pyongyang, Abrams said Seoul and Washington are not publicizing all of their joint military exercises, something they used to do to show the region that the alliance is strong and acts as a deterrent. As for the American troops stationed in South Korea, he said they have nothing to do with any potential peace treaty with North Korea and that their presence is a decision solely for the alliance. Kan Young-woo, Arirang News.
A new sign America might be adjusting its stance on North Korea's human rights abuses. Washington has taken out a word describing such violations by the regime in its latest report. Lee Seung-jae explains further.
Egregious, meaning outstandingly bad or shocking. It's a word previously used to describe North Korea's human rights abuses. However, in the U.S. State Department's annual country reports on human rights practices, the word egregious was removed in describing the North's human rights violations. The report also made no mention of the regime in its preface, whereas in the previous year, the North was labeled among forces of instability, along with China, Russia, and Iran. However, the 29-page section on North Korea still revealed a long list of human rights violations. Such violations included unlawful or arbitrary killings by the government, forced disappearances by the government, and torture by government authorities. The list covered arbitrary detentions by security forces, detention centers, and political prison camps, where conditions were often harsh and life-threatening. It also mentioned severe restrictions of religious freedom, coerced abortion, and human trafficking. At a press briefing on Wednesday, the U.S. State Department's Ambassador for Democracy, Human Rights, and Labor, Michael Kozak, says there hasn't been much progress in North Korea when it comes to the area of human rights. He added it's still one of the worst human rights situations in the world, and the U.S. will continue to work to persuade the regime to change its behavior. North Korea has rejected accusations of human rights abuses, calling it a U.S.-led attempt to topple the regime. Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
The UN Security Council has granted a sanctions waiver to 5 organizations to provide humanitarian assistance to North Korea. According to its website, the 5 groups include the UN Population Fund and the French NGO Première Urgence Internationale. That makes a total of 20 organizations or institutions that have been granted exemptions so far. The 5 groups were given the green light to send supplies to the north until September this year. They will likely be able to deliver food and medical equipment. Seoul's National Security Chief Chung Eui-yong met with members of the National Security Council today. They discussed ways to improve relations between the 2 Koreas and with the U.S. within the framework of international sanctions. The NSC Standing Committee also reviewed an annual report by experts on the UN Sanctions Committee on North Korea and talked about ways to continue dialogue towards achieving complete denuclearization. The second Pyongyang-Washington summit might have ended with no agreement, but America's top diplomat is hopeful that North Korea will follow through on its promise. Kim Yo-sun shares with us his remarks.
U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo has expressed optimism North Korea will continue its current state of not conducting nuclear and missile tests. During an interview with Texas radio station KPRC2 on Wednesday, Pompeo also explained that the North's leader Kim Jong-un pledged during the Hanoi summit that his regime will not carry out further nuclear and missile tests. However, Pompeo also stressed the international society has to put pressure on the regime through sanctions to urge Kim to make the right strategic choice. Such a remark can be interpreted as a warning amid recent signs of increased activity at the regime's key missile launch site at Dongchangli. Pompeo also stressed there is still much work to do, adding the regime has not yet fulfilled the commitment Kim made to President Trump. Pompeo highlighted that denuclearization not only benefits the U.S., but the international community as a whole. Speaking with other media outlets in Texas, Pompeo also urged Kim to take action, reiterating that action is the only thing that counts. Kim Yo-sun, Arirang News.
Since the Hanoi summit, North Korea and the U.S. continue to call on each other to take actions. At the same time, they're leaving room for future negotiations, Pyongyang making no harsh rhetorics and Washington temporarily lowering pressure on human rights. Oh Jung-hee has the full story.
2 weeks have passed since the second North Korea-U.S. summit in Hanoi, and Pyongyang and Washington are sticking to their positions. But at the same time, they're being strategically flexible, trying not to break the negotiations. In its human rights report published on Wednesday, Washington, unlike last year, did not label North Korea as one of forces of instability. The word egregious was removed as well. This is a slight change in Washington's tone towards the regime compared to the day before. A UN panel report pointed out Tuesday that North Korea's main nuclear facility in Yongbyon has remained active and that the regime continues to illegally buy petroleum and coal. The U.S. welcomed that report as a chance to step up the enforcement of sanctions, stressing that the regime will remain economically and diplomatically isolated unless it denuclearizes. North Korea is also staying calm. Since the summit broke down, it has not criticized or blamed the U.S. Rather, North Korean media are reporting that the regime is still up for complete denuclearization. But Pyongyang's propaganda outlets are still calling for Washington to change its position, claiming that there can be no better deal between the two sides at this point than Pyongyang dismantling its Yongbyon nuclear test site and the U.S. lifting sanctions partially in return. Both sides are trying not to break the dialogue momentum. Their actions and rhetoric show they're leaving room for future negotiations. But because the U.S. continues to pursue a one-shot deal with North Korea, while Pyongyang is calling for a multi-phased approach to denuclearization, it seems it'll take some time until the two sides sit down with each other again. Oh Jung-hee, Arirang News.
Countries around the world, including Korea, have been quickly taking necessary measures following crashes involving Boeing 737 MAX planes. Most recent one, a tragedy in Ethiopia that killed everyone on board. The U.S. is following suit, ordering all these models and related ones be grounded. Hong Yu has the latest.
We're going to be issuing an emergency order of prohibition to ground all flights of the 737 MAX 8 and the 737 MAX 9 and planes associated with that line.
On Thursday, U.S. President Donald Trump decided to ground all Boeing 737 MAX jets in the country because of safety concerns after the same model crashed twice in a 5-month period. Last weekend, a 737 MAX jet operated by Ethiopian Airlines crashed shortly after takeoff, killing all 157 people on board. A 737 MAX operated by Lion Air smashed into the Java Sea last October, killing 189 people. As concerns over the safety of the aircraft reached fever pitch in the U.S., President Trump overrode the Federal Aviation Administration, the U.S. airline industry, and even the CEO of Boeing, who personally reached out to Trump to try and convince him the planes are safe. The FAA earlier said it would not stop operations because it could not find any performance problems with the jet. Shortly after President Trump announced his decision, the FAA cited new satellite data and evidence from the crash scene that showed the flight path and behavior of the Ethiopian Airlines flight was very similar to the doomed Lion Air flight. Officials say more evidence is required to prove a conclusive link between the disasters, but until then, the planes will remain on the tarmac for the safety of travelers. Meanwhile, South Korean Airlines Korean Air and T-Way Air announced on Thursday that they won't operate any 737 MAX 8 and MAX 9 aircraft until their safety can be assured. Korean Air had plans to incorporate 50 of the aircraft into its fleet by 2025, and T-Way had plans to bring in 4 by the end of the year. Hong Yu, Arirang News.
President Moon Jae-in is in Cambodia, the last stop of his 3-nation tour of the ASEAN region, and there he hopes to boost bilateral relations, particularly in finance and agriculture. Shin Se-min files us this report.
The president's focus for the last stop of his trip is again expanding multilateral cooperation in Southeast Asia on the financial and infrastructure front. In his compact 3-day schedule for his stay in Cambodia, the president will meet with Prime Minister Hun Sen and discuss business in agriculture, infrastructure, construction, and finance, among many other fields. The presidential office explains that firming up ties with Cambodia is crucial, as it is a nation where Seoul had $975 million worth of trade volume last year.
Through manufacturing, scientific technology, and ICT, cooperation between Korea and Cambodia, exchanging their abilities, will be a reality.
The leaders will also attend a bilateral business forum with the theme of recreating the miracle on the Han River on the Mekong, where President Moon will also deliver a keynote speech. Korea's leading businesses, including Samsung Electronics, Hyundai Motor, and Hanwha Q-Cells, will also be at the forum as the leaders of both countries present to buttress future business deals. A constructive step in the president's pivot to Southeast Asia. The South Korean leader is hoping that his stops in the region will help lay the groundwork for what could be a new business paradigm for his country, heavily reliant on trade. Shin Se-min, Arirang News, Phnom Penh.
Seoul and Tokyo agreed to continue negotiations to avoid a further strain in ties over the court rulings here in the nation on Japan's use of forced labor. Director General for Northeast Asian Affairs Kim Yong-gil and his Japanese counterpart Kenji Kanasugi met on Thursday, mainly to discuss ways to resolve the bilateral dispute. The session came amid reports that Tokyo is reviewing economic retaliation, such as raising tariffs on South Korean imports and restricting the issuance of visas. According to an official at the Foreign Ministry, the two sides agreed to hold further talks to keep such measures from further worsening bilateral relations. Meanwhile, Kanasugi is scheduled to meet Seoul's top nuclear envoy Lee Do-hun tomorrow to discuss North Korea's denuclearization. 2 K-pop stars were summoned for interrogation at Seoul Police Headquarters today. Seungri and Jung Joon-young are embroiled in growing sex scandals. Kim Da-mi gets us up to speed with the developments.
Police have once again questioned Seungri, now a former member of a Korean boy band Big Bang, over allegations that he solicited prostitutes for his potential business partners. This was his first interrogation as a criminal suspect after last month's questioning as a witness in a case involving the alleged use and distribution of drugs and rape at a Seoul nightclub. Unlike last time when Seungri said he hopes to uncover the truth, this time he offered an apology.
I apologize to the people who were hurt. Rather than saying anything at this stage, I will sincerely cooperate with the police investigation and respond truthfully.
Seungri is scheduled to enlist in the South Korean military on March 25th, so his case is likely to be transferred to the High Court of the Armed Forces. The Seoul police and the military, though, have yet to discuss how they will handle the case. Early Thursday morning, singer Seungri Jung Joon-young was also questioned over allegations that he secretly filmed himself having sex with several women and that shared the clips with his friends through a mobile group chat. When asked if he has filmed anything recently or used drugs while filming, Jung did not comment about his cooperation with the police. The police said that they're considering an arrest warrant for Jung in view of the seriousness of the allegations. In addition, according to the police, another group chat involving Seungri and Seung Jun-young made around July 2016 mentioned that the police commissioner general had their backs. While the former top officer denies any involvement in the case, the National Police Agency said it will launch a special investigation into the allegations that officers turned a blind eye to illegal activities, including sexual assaults at Burning Sun nightclub. Kim Da-mi, Arirang News.
The head of the South Korean police has come forward and vowed to thoroughly investigate the sex video scandal and promised an internal inspection of the agency. For details, let's turn to our Choi Si-young.
At a parliamentary meeting convened Thursday by the Public Administration and Security Committee, South Korea's police commissioner stressed that his agency is committed to a comprehensive investigation of the sex scandal.
We will thoroughly investigate both the new claims and the alleged crimes currently being discussed.
The chief also addressed the growing suspicions about ties between the police and the perpetrators.
I will also carry out a tough internal inspection of the agency, punish those involved regardless of rank, and report the findings to the public.
A day earlier, the commissioner gave an unscheduled press conference to address the scandal. He said the police could not immediately arrest the singer Seung Joon-young, accused of making the sex videos, because so far there are only suspicions and not enough evidence that he committed a crime. Jung had just returned from shooting a TV show overseas. While the top police chief reassured the public that the investigation will be thorough, some are still skeptical and demand that prosecutors themselves take over the case. Choi Si-young, Arirang News.
Moving on to other stories now, latest government data shows the trade volume between Korea and the U.S. hit a record high last year. Ko Rin-hee help us gauge the impact of the two sides' FTA.
It's been 7 years since Seoul and Washington's free trade deal came into force. And according to Korea's trade ministry on Thursday, the trade volume between the two sides last year hit a record high of around $131.6 billion. This is an increase of more than 10% compared to the previous year, and the trade volume has been increasing for 2 consecutive years. Korea's exports to the U.S. rose by 6% in 2018, thanks to more outbound shipments of semiconductors and petroleum goods. Chip exports jumped by more than 90%, thanks to more investment from data centers boosting demand for semiconductors. However, auto exports decreased by almost 7% due to an increase in competition in the U.S. market. Korea's imports from the U.S. also grew by more than 16%, mainly due to more inbound shipments of liquefied petroleum gas and natural gas. LPG shipments from the U.S. increased by more than 50% compared to the previous year. The ministry attributed the rise in shipments from the U.S. to cheaper prices compared to other regions like the Middle East. Because of the increase in imports, the trade surplus decreased by almost 23% compared to the previous year. Experts in the field say the trend is likely to continue.
The U.S. is trying to reduce its trade deficit. Therefore, many other countries, including Korea, will try to decrease the size of their surplus when trading with the U.S. Also, I think it is important to closely monitor Washington's decision in regards to the Section 232 tariffs on automobiles and automotive parts.
Trade protectionist measures by the U.S. will continue, so it is important for Korean companies to prepare for those. Also, we should remember that the Trump administration is focusing on protecting intellectual property rights. Therefore, local firms should not infringe on other countries' rights and at the same time should come up with measures to protect their own rights.
The Trade Ministry added that the effects of the revised Seoul-Washington Free Trade Agreement, which came into force in January, will be reflected in next year's data. Korea, Arirang News.
Seoul's investment in science and technology is one of the highest in the world, and it looks like we could claw up that ranking even further and higher up. According to our Oh Soo-young, the government plans to increase public spending in core sectors given the proliferation of AI and smart technology.
South Korea plans to increase public spending on artificial intelligence and renewable energy as core sectors of research and development. On Thursday, the Ministry of Science and ICT announced its 2020 investment guidelines, which aim to make public spending on science more efficient and increase positive social impact. In the era of the Fourth Industrial Revolution, the ministry added AI and renewable energies to its key areas of R&D, along with driverless cars, fine dust reduction technology, and smart infrastructure. Such technology is deemed crucial, especially with South Korea soon to become the first country in the world to commercialize 5G for regular consumers. Given the ongoing fine dust problem on the peninsula, the ministry plans to work with the private sector to expand investment in technology to lower the environmental impact from chemicals, as well as reduce air pollution. Other areas of investment include technology related to agriculture, aerospace, disaster response, and defense. South Korea is one of the world's biggest spenders in R&D, coming fifth in terms of total annual spending and ranking first in terms of the amount relative to GDP. Investment has grown from some $2.8 billion in 1990 to $61 billion in 2016. The number of researchers topped 460,000 in 2016, nearly 3 times the number of about 20 years ago. While investing in new technology, the ministry also plans to ramp up investment in basic science research to $2.2 billion, up from the $1.5 billion allotted this year. Oh Soo-young, Arirang News.
The two Koreas agreed to engage in more economic cooperation when the leaders met at last year's summits. Down the road, that could mean tourism. Local experts met on Thursday to talk about specific plans for peaceful use of the demilitarized zone as a tourism destination. Lee Min-sun has the highlights from that session.
Experts and officials from the culture and tourism sectors gathered in Seoul on Thursday to discuss ways to build peaceful tourism in the demilitarized zone. The forum was held by the Culture Ministry and the Korea Tourism Organization as South and North take practical steps toward peace in the DMZ by removing landmines and guard posts. The hope is that the DMZ will come to stand for togetherness and peace instead of pain and division. Some of the programs suggested at the forum include joint tours of famous mountains in both Koreas like Seoraksan in the south and Kumgangsan in the north. Also, a train that would take passengers sightseeing along the east coast and an ecology peace garden that would give visitors a peek at the region's untouched natural environment. Some experts also emphasized the importance of tourism in building a virtuous cycle of sustainable peace and economic growth.
Tourism is one of the two Koreas' major forms of economic exchange and cooperation that can sustain peace. Cooperation in tourism is usually accompanied by projects in logistics and infrastructure, and that will likely be a new engine for the economy.
Still, before peace tourism can move forward in earnest, there need to be major steps taken in terms of denuclearization and lifting of sanctions. But the experts think now is still the best time to discuss the possibility as South and North look to build their ties and cooperate in a range of fields. Lee Min-sun, Arirang News.
Time to turn to Michelle Bach at the Weather Center for the updates you'll need. Michelle, precipitation has begun in the central region.
Yes, Daniel, rain clouds are slowly moving in as we speak. In a few more hours, though, the whole nation is expected to be under rainy clouds. Until Friday afternoon, that is. Then, meanwhile, Beijing and Tokyo will get to the end of the week with lots of sunshine. Except for the coastal regions, the country can expect some rain mixed with some snow. Now, the amount of precipitation will be small for the northwestern regions, but snow will come down heavy over in the mountains in Gangwon-do province, with up to 8 centimeters of snow in the forecast for some of the regions. In the morning, the northwestern regions may also see high levels of fine dust again, with Seoul kicking off the morning at 2 degrees Celsius, Busan at 6, and Jeju at 8 degrees Celsius. And the daily highs won't go higher than the mid-teens under gloomy skies. After tomorrow's rain, sunny spells are for this weekend. I'll leave you with the weather conditions around the world.
That's all we could pack into our newscast. Thanks for watching. Goodbye for now.